To this now, the Engineering Council of South Africa has placed an engineer linked to the George building collapse on precautionary suspension. The building collapse on May the 6th left 34 people dead and many others injured. Let's get the very latest now. We speak to Dr. Bridget, Ssamula, CEO of the Engineering Council of South Africa. Thank you so much, Dr. Ssamula, for your time this afternoon. A number of people, of course, looking at this particular development, placing the engineer in question on precautionary suspension as a disciplinary action, is it?
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity. The precautionary suspension is actually a preventative measure to be able to ensure that in the interest of public health and safety, which is really a mandate with the Engineers Profession Act, that we want to stop the registered person from being able to undertake any engineering activities under the guise of a registered person. But the second one is to be able to widen the search and understand all the other structures that he has been involved in over the last 3 years, so that we can then be able to do an audit on the buildings.
And when you're doing this particular audit, will it encompass, the engineer's entire history, maybe looking at some of the buildings they may have been involved in?
The question is no, and I think the initial one is the determination to make it about 3 years, so that we can then be able to ascertain the structural integrity, so that in the interest of public health and safety, we are able to have a level of comfort that we do not have a repeat of what happened in George, just so that we can be able to perform our function as a regulator.
So as of course, the regulator, when you're looking at this particular matter and the public interest that you've seen in this, and the number of lives, in fact, that have also been, lost in this particular process. Let's talk first about number one. When then looking at, the said engineer, there are some reports that are suggesting that there may have been some 2 complaints possibly in the past against this engineer. Have there been? Do you know of that?
Yes, we did issue a media statement on that. We've received 2 previous complaints. The first one was in 2019, and that one was not found to have anything substantive for him to be charged. So that one, no charges were preferred. The second one was received in 2023. There was an investigation that was held, and that one was a little bit more serious. So the council in April 2024 made the decision to then prefer charges, and the disciplinary tribunal process, that one is underway. So we do have previous complaints that we've received against the registered person.
So in light of this 2023 one as well, that would have preferred charges, and that matter, of course, as you say, is still ongoing, should that person have been operating? Technically, because the 2023, remember the process is that when EXA makes the decision to prefer charges, they then have the ability to go for a disciplinary tribunal. And then because it's a quasi-judicial process, only at the outcome of that the disciplinary tribunal and the hearing, because at that hearing, the Audi Partum rule applies, and he's allowed to then provide his own version of events, and then only at the end of that disciplinary process, if the decision is then to prefer charges, is when a decision is made, not before that. So right now, as you say, of course, looking at this particular matter, and the reason I ask is that if you still have this matter then hanging above your head, then should you be continuing to work? Because in 2024, here you are, and now we've seen what happened.
I think that is why on the preliminary findings, the investigator then came to the investigating committee of council and then made the recommendations that were then taken through to council in June to say that let us put the individual on precautionary suspension, because now these had been 2 matters within a 6-month period.
And so that was the reason why, even though the disciplinary processes are still ongoing and the hearings are still ongoing and the investigation on the George matter is also ongoing, it is prudent that for public health and safety, that the registered person be put on precautionary suspension.
Isn't it maybe a time that maybe the council also relook that, for example, if you have one matter that is viewed as serious and then it's still ongoing, maybe then a red flag or an orange flag or even whatever, amber flag would be put against the name of that particular individual to say, maybe do not work for a certain period of time until this matter is completed, because right now, as you say, these two matters are in quick succession and you're finding yourself with problems. So maybe, isn't that maybe a loophole that you might need to look at?
Look, we are all faced with a scenario that we've never had to deal with before, right? Our engineers have always been doing what is right by the public interest in terms of health and safety. We also accredit university programs, so the quality of the engineer that we get, and when they go through professional competency as a registered person, we expect a certain level of professionalism that should come through. Situations like this are rare, and we are looking at some of the things that we need to do differently. Definitely one is the incident management response that happens on events like this, but also what happens when you have repeat findings for individuals. So it is a process that we are going to be able to look at internally and see what we do differently, but we have to be careful so that we do not prejudice individuals, because you can imagine that the regulator is also used sometimes to fight contractual issues between an engineer and a client. And so we want to make sure that we are not prejudicing anybody out of their right to trade and practice based on the improper conduct process.
It's a fine line, Dr. Ssamula, as you say, definitely a fine line, and as you say, uncharted waters. But I do hope we'll speak again when then there are findings and you know exactly which way to go here, and also maybe give us a sense then of, looking ahead, as you say, how then do you begin not to prejudice an individual, but at the same time ensuring that things are done by the book. But we do appreciate you speaking to us on the show this afternoon. That was Dr. Bridget Ssamula, the CEO of the Engineering Council of South Africa.